So the Mediterranean stuffed peppers, just like with cabbage rolls, there's a lot of varieties and different ways to actually cook this. But just like the cabbage rolls, I did my mixture. I sautéed and did all my mixture first, and then did my stuff. Some recipes will ask you to blanch your peppers. We're roasting them. So I didn't see any need to wash a lot of the nutrients out in a pot of water first. And then you get back to the energy thing. You're boiling the water, you're using heat for something that is completely unnecessary. And here we have lovely fat pig roasted. The reason I call this Mediterranean is you're using some of the Mediterranean flavors. You've got chickpeas, cumin, some pine nuts, some cinnamon in there. Red peppers, cooked chickpeas. Here's a funny story. If you're, say, a chef and you're going to be doing a cooking demo, and chickpeas take a little while. That's the soak overnight. Do the rinse, get fresh water, and then cook. You want to cook your lentils and your beans at a low temperature. Just because if you've got it on high and you're boiling away, you're really going to be destroying all that starch because of all that energy, all that heat you're throwing at it. So if you use a lower heat, you're going to keep the integrity of your bean a little longer. So I took my daughter out today and said to the wife, "Yeah, could you please wash those chickpeas for me?" She had to go out too, and when we came back, of course, the pan was on fire and the alarms were going off and stuff like that. So, watch your stuff! Timers. Timers are everything. I got one right on my oven and I use it a lot because if I don't, even I will forget things, especially in the middle of cooking processes. So this one's pretty easy. The rest would go. Aha! Nice. Same kind of flavor saver situation. Your grapeseed and your olive oil. Cook your onions down. It becomes, I don't like to use the word repetitive, but it's a nice, easy kind of way to prep and cook as you're going on. So you got your thing, your pan, your oil, cut your onion, and it goes. And you're prepping as you're cooking. And that's why there's usually a little bit of a time. They give you some times. It takes about 10 minutes for your onions to sweet. Add your fennel, about 5 minutes. And with these, I wasn't doing a dice. I was doing a little more, I don't know if you can see here, more of a slice. So a little bit of a length, you don't want a cube. So I cut my onion in half, put it down, cut it in half again, and then come crossways. So you have that a nice slice around yay long. Hey?
I haven't yet cooked with fennel. No, it's shaved. Anyway, so you use the whole part, or like?
I use the bulb. For something like this, I'm talking about the bulb, not the top, not the greens. Fennel bulb, because that's the root.
Yeah.
I use the top stuff. It doesn't take as long to cook. It's a little greener. It's a little, it has a little more of the licorice flavoring to it. So if I'm doing a frittata or something that's kind of fast, I'll use the tops. They're also really nice for salads. Just slice them up really thin. They work quite well. But when you're doing these kind of things, and I've got fennel in a recipe, it's generally the bulb. It's got some good heat resistance. It can be baked, it can be grilled, you can saute it. It's a lovely, lovely, I even put it in my mirepoix for my stocks, especially for the fish. It just has a lovely flavor. It's very versatile. Get the fennel. So you want those two root vegetables softened up a little bit because the eggplant doesn't take much time at all. You don't want to overcook this mixture. It could basically be a salad by itself before you put it in here. Then you got your cumin, half a teaspoon each of black pepper and mustard seed, a little bit of cinnamon there just to kind of sweeten it up, half a cup or 2/3 of a cup of chopped black olives. Now, usually I like to sweat my vegetables and get my salt and pepper in there a bit early because you've got the pores opened up. It's soft. You want to get your seasoning in there before you add your liquid, because if you add your liquid first, then you're seasoning your liquid instead of everything that's going into it. So when you're sauteing your vegetables, a little salt and pepper there. But because we're adding black olives, and they tend to be a little salty, depends on what kind of olives you're using, where you get them from, and the saltiness of the brine. So for this particular recipe, I would salt more at the end because you're adding a salty ingredient. Same thing if you're adding any of the God forbid you have to use store-bought stocks instead of making your own wholesome, lovely food. You never know how much sodium or whatnot, chemical love they've got in there. So if I was using a store-bought product, I would also wait to salt to the end. Black olives, pine nuts. Tasty, aphrodisiac, lovely stuff. Very expensive. You'll find it down in the cold section
So,
down there.
if you're being a little frugal,
Yes.
what would you use instead of pine nuts?
Wishful thinking. No, cashews are almost as expensive, and they really wouldn't go. I would say SOL. You know, and they are expensive, but they add. It's an unnecessary ingredient, but it's a little bit of love in there. Yeah, the ones that you get down in there.
How come they're so expensive?
I just cook the food. I'm not the supplier, so
No,
I probably
but I mean any place. Not just Pleasant.
must be supply and demand. That's generally how economics works, so that's the answer I'm going with. Black olives, pine nuts, juice of a lemon, the lemon and the tomato juice. But when you're doing these kind of things like bind, you actually need a little bit of liquid to, it helps with the binding process. Dry stuff crumbles. You add a little bit of wet, it's going to help you turn into a glue when you get all those starches coming off. So this we've got chickpeas and the millet. I love millet, offline grain, very beautiful, can be used in many, many, many things. Traditionally in a Mediterranean recipe you would use couscous. I don't use couscous because it's nothing but processed wheat as opposed to millet, which is a real food. It's
Whole
a grain.
Hey? Whole grain, whole wheat couscous.
Yeah.
I know.
As an alternative, as a healthier alternative to couscous, millet, because it has a similar size, a relatively similar flavor profile, except nutrients of couscous here, nutrients of millet here, lamp falling down here. You know what I mean?
Quinoa?
Quinoa, yeah, very good too. Quinoa is a bit wet. The reason I like millet for this recipe instead of quinoa, it's a little heartier.
Is millet gluten-free?
Yes, absolutely.
What about the amaranth?
Amaranth, very nice too. A very small grain for something like this, but I've used it in salads, like lentil salads and bean whatnot. Very nice to throw in. It also makes a very nice gluten-free bread. So when you put little portions of amaranth in there, it's a very, very small grain. Something like this, I needed something a little bigger, providing a little more starch to add to the bind. Amaranth is a bit small and maybe a little higher in protein, so you're not going to get that stickiness as you would from millet. It's just a bit bigger.
What about
Quinoa, same kind of thing. It's a little wetter still, and this was really, the choice of millet was really the Mediterranean. It's as close as you're going to get to looking and tasting like couscous. You could feed that to somebody and they wouldn't know. They would just know that they felt really, really good after eating it. So, you get your mixture all done. Get that nice stuff all sauteed, and then you throw in your cooked grains and chickpeas closer at the end. Give it a bit of a toss. Millet, tomato juice, cook for 5 minutes. Mint is something that kind of works well. I don't cook a lot with it, but it kind of offsets a lot of the savory in here. You've got cumin, all those nice dark, rich flavors. Mint lightens it up, the mint and the basil. As soon as you add those two things, we talked about adding thyme. Thyme and rosemary you can add a little bit and cook in. That English stews and things like that. With delicates like mint and basil, put them in at the end and remove from heat. You don't want to cook them because they're going to get bitter and you're going to lose a lot of the nutritional value and the coolness that they actually bring to the food. It's a contrast in flavor.
So
you get,
it's better to add basil and
for this kind of stuff, I would, or even for pastas, because it's a pretty delicate plant. It's a nice cooling flavor as opposed to, if you're doing dry though, you would add it in a little earlier because you need dry herbs, you add in early, fresh herbs, you add in at the end. Bada bing, bada boom, bada bing. So, get your pepper. Cut it off the top. You want to gut out all the seeds and the pith. Those are the ribs. They're pretty bitter. They don't taste very nice. And then stuff it. Get it in there pretty good. Get it in there down to the top. And this has got quite the crust on it, which we may actually remove. But what we're going to do with this, because it's quite savory, is for this particular dish, I would strongly suggest serving it with a little bit of a salad. And we talked about cooling.